Hi, I'm Paul Camillos from Shooting the Breeze podcast. Join the STB crew for conversations and stories around women's hoops and women in hoops, inspiring players, amazing coaches, and the legends behind the scenes. It's our 7th season. Drop us a like and review, and make sure to subscribe for early access and other bonus content.
Because we also appreciated if we won, but there was no one in the stands, it wasn't going to be very fun. If we won and there was no one in the corporate sponsorship, well, what was this for? If we won and we didn't like each other and want to celebrate with each other, what's the point of this thing? So really the messaging I had, and I think what the group bought into, was more about we will win because we do all these things well.
Welcome to Shooting the Breeze. I'm Paul Camillos, and with my co-host Jacinta Govind, we're being joined by one of the WNBL's legendary imports. A 5-time champion with 2 different teams, including back-to-back championships with Canberra and Bendigo, who's carved out such a place in Australian basketball that her initials and number are introduction enough. Welcome, KG23, Kelsey Griffin. It's great to have you join us on the show. And to be honest, it's someone we've really wanted to get on the show for a while. It's great to have you here.
Oh, it's great to be here. That's the ultimate hype up right there. That's yeah, a bit blushing almost, I'd say.
So, firstly, I mean, congratulations, 5 times champion. It's you're getting up there into some of that, really rarefied atmosphere. What's it like?
Look, I think it's something that probably, like most things I'm learning, it will take a bit of time to sink in and truly understand the gravity of it. However, because I'm fortunate to be playing into my late 30s, I have so much perspective now compared to my other 2 sets of championships. And so I think with the few speaking engagements that I've done since winning the championship, and really this speaking to this season and how it was unfolding during the season, I think I just have so much appreciation. And I think gratitude and appreciation is something I've struggled with throughout my career, because as a female fighting for progression and betterment, you kind of get stuck in this weird relationship with gratitude, because you want to be appreciative and thankful for those that came before you, but at the same time, you deserve better and want things to be better. And so I've really struggled with this gratitude. Gratitude's been something that it's a word. Language is so important, and I've just really struggled with it. However, this season, that's really just how I can sum it up, is just immense gratitude for this place, the people, and the way we were able to go about business. That the championship was really the cherry on top, which I think makes it so special.
You've had your mates join you for the ride, like Kelly Wilson, Tolo. So between you all, what's the chemistry like, and what is it that contributes to that winning formula in the team, particularly when you've spent so much time playing together, even if it has been in different teams?
I think anyone who knows Tolo knows that she just makes you better by being around her. She's just one of these rare people in the world that, I'm a better person because I'm around her, and I'm lucky enough to call her a friend. And whilst she's incredibly humble and caring and giving, she's also a fierce competitor in her own right. And the way she goes about it, she just makes those around her better. And she's so giving of herself in time. And I think that is why success follows Tolo where she's gone. And the special thing that I've learned from playing with her is how she can go about doing it, where it's not an at all costs, but it's with perspective, and she just finds joy in the little things. And so that's something where Tolo, I think, has really given me life to my career because of how she goes about being a champion. And so she's made me better. And I think that's certainly a reason that we were hugely successful. But I think I could almost go through everyone on my team and say the reason we were successful is because of this person, which is what makes it special. And Kelly is somebody who, she just defies logic and time, and is getting better every season in some aspect. Like some of the defensive efforts I saw Kelly do this season, was just some of the best defense I've seen her play, and the passion and love that she plays with for the game. And she still, like, she genuinely says she still loves playing basketball, after 20, 22 seasons or 23 seasons, whatever it is. And that's contagious. That's infectious. Like when you see all the other starters after a game, the next session, we usually have an optional one. And Kelly always is opting in. If there's an option, Kelly is always opting in. And so when you have someone who has every right, if anyone has a right to miss a session, it's certainly somebody who's still working, has a 4-year-old, and has played more games than anyone else. And she's the one who's consistently choosing to opt in. And so when you have that kind of leadership, for both of those caliber of players, it's great to see the young ones, going, wow, like that's what it takes. That's what that's how I can be successful. So I think, well, and that's all the basketball side of things. And then, off the court, they're just great people to be around, which makes it all the better. Yeah.
So I'm curious because you talked about Kelly, the number of seasons she's been playing in the WNBL.
Mm.
I mean, when you really think about it, it's like it's an astounding statistic.
Yeah.
If anybody told you that you'd be seeing Kelly Wilson after so many seasons playing at the level that she was playing at this season, if they'd said that to you maybe 5 years ago, would you have believed it?
I've learned to never put anything past Kelly. And in fact, if somebody says she can't do something or shouldn't do something, it's almost definitely going to happen. Is what I've learned about Kelly. She has that mindset. I think, hearing her story, and she's someone, if you ever get the chance to hear Kelly talk, like, she's her journey and her ability to articulate what got her to where she is and her perspective, I think, is just phenomenal. I love getting to sit on panels. It rarely happens because she's so busy, but when I do get to get on a panel with Kelly and hear her speak about basketball, I always learn something. But the thing that I think Kelly really prides herself on is being a non-selection. Like, so she was somebody who didn't have the physical attributes, who wasn't somebody that was, earmarked as the next thing. And so prided herself on work ethic. And, if a coach said, you need to work on your shooting, well, she was going to work on her shooting. And that was something that Kelly, I think, has carried with her throughout her career. And so then when people, I think, make assumptions around, she's 35 or however old she was when she won with Townsville, like, surely she's going to have kids and retire. And it's like, no, I'm going to have kids and I'm actually going to come back even better and I'm going to win more championships, like that. Like that's who Kelly Wilson is. But I think for me, what was so special about this year is just the joy that Kelly got to play with. She's a fierce competitor and she expects greatness of herself. And I think she is, probably her harshest critic. And so this season, to get her, mentor Veronica from a point guard standpoint, but then also get to have joy and play tenacious D, like, it was awesome. Like, so it was really fun for me as a friend to get to see her after so many years of working so hard, just really enjoy herself.
I'm kind of curious about the way the season unfolded for you guys. At what point, because, every team goes into a season thinking, yeah, we're going to make the finals.
Yeah.
But there's a point where you kind of go, yeah, we've got this.
Mm.
What was that point for the team this season?
Cool. I reckon if you asked all of us, we'd probably all have different moments. I don't know. I don't know, because we weren't a team that sat down and was like, this is our goals, this is our identity, this is who we want to be. Like, we weren't that team. We didn't do a lot of talking about how we wanted to approach trainings. There was very little talk actually about it. It was, we had our normal preseason. Veronica and Sammy showed up, I think, 10 days before the first regular season game, because that's what happens with WNBA players. It's just the reality of the situation. They're coming off a really intense season. They need some downtime, and then it's really only a couple of weeks. And so we kind of, for me, my messaging all season was like, who we are in November is not who we're going to be in March. And so it's like, I almost didn't want us to put too much pressure, expectation on ourselves early, because the reality is we needed chemistry. And especially with Kennedy's system, it's something that you need chemistry. You need to learn how to play off one another. You need to learn how to take advantage of moments. And so I didn't want us to get too worried if things didn't go our way right off the bat, that this wasn't something we could build and work towards. Now, did I think we would have the start that we had? No. Did I think I would break my finger 2 days before round one? No. So I think that almost, I wouldn't say changed the expectation, but I suppose hopefully it gave a little bit of grace. But, it also was opportunity. And Casey stepped up and played, career best basketball, which was awesome to see. And it just proved that we had more depth than maybe originally people thought that we had. And Abby had a few injuries, concussions early. And so it was kind of this, like, we were still figuring each other out, but Kendi was also figuring out lineups for the first part of the season. So, and then we had that little slump right before Christmas, which we can probably look back now and say, yep, those teams took absolute advantage. They played great. They beat us 100%. We also there's a little bit of fatigue, probably mental fatigue more than anything rolling into that. And Christmas break was really, really important for us. And so I think for us, or for me, I also didn't want to get ahead of myself. This season, I really wanted to try to stay in the moment as much as possible. And I think in seasons and championships in the past, I've been so goal focused about winning. I haven't been able to actually enjoy my season because it's felt like if we don't win, this was a loss. And so my messaging all season was our championship, if we win, which I don't even know if I ever even allowed myself to say those words. If we had success, if we experienced the ultimate success, it was going to be a byproduct of our actions. Like that wasn't our end goal. That's like what was going to happen because of everything else we did. That's not all we were focusing on, because we also appreciated if we won, but there was no one in the stands, it wasn't going to be very fun. If we won and there was no one in the corporate sponsorship, well, what was this for? If we won and we didn't like each other and want to celebrate with each other, what's the point of this thing? So really the messaging I had, and I think what the group bought into, was more about we will win because we do all these things well. That's not why we're playing. We're playing because we care about each other. We believe in this style of basketball. We want to do things this way. We want to build back the relationship with the community. We want to feel connection to each other, and then we'll win because of that. So I don't know. I guess with 4 seconds left in the game 2 in Townsville, that's when I knew we could win a championship.
I want to learn a little bit more about, you talk about team chemistry. So kind of like quick reflection on your career as an individual versus the chemistry you had with Bendigo Spirit in the most recent season. What do you think it takes to cultivate good chemistry? And have you ever been in a situation where a team you were a part of didn't necessarily have great chemistry, but were able to overcome that and develop chemistry? What goes into it?
It's a really good question. Gosh, I don't know. I think for me, my experience early with basketball in Australia was all about chemistry, and that was Australian basketball. So like going from the WNBA, which was very athletic, one-on-one isolation when I played basketball, to coming to Australia, where it was like you do an action with a teammate, there's a read and react, and you trust your teammate's going to find the open play or make the right read. And I was like, this is fun basketball. Australian basketball is fun basketball. And, when I look at who I was playing with, Gabe Richards, Chelsea Obrey, Chrissy Harrower, Kelly Wilson, like Heather Oliver, the players I got to play with were high IQ players. And so it was really fun basketball. And the people around you relied on, they made you better. And so I think for me, chemistry, since I came out here, has always been a really important thing in everything that I do, in every team that I'm a part of. And I think the converse to that was my experience in the WNBA, and everyone's experience over there is different. But for me, I really struggled with the individuality of the brand of basketball that I was a part of. And I struggled with that jump to being a pro and what that was like. And so it was coming to Australia and getting to play in teams that had this great chemistry. And I think any team that I've been successful with or experienced the ultimate success in a championship with, it's been because of chemistry. And that was same with the Caps. And that was certainly the same this year. I think where I've had teams that have maybe underachieved, it's been a breakdown for me in that chemistry that's happened, or individuals putting themselves in front of the team, or maybe thinking that success looks like an all-star selection or an MVP selection instead of team success. And I don't hold that against individuals, because the reality of our sport is the more individual accolades you get, unfortunately, the more money you get paid. It's not necessarily like you get paid on team success. That's not really how our sport always works. It actually doesn't always celebrate or acknowledge team success necessarily as much as individual success. So I don't hold that against anyone. I just have come to realize that the brand of basketball I like playing and enjoying is usually team success, where everyone understands that, it can be anyone's night on any night, and it can be a really fun game. I know that didn't really answer your questions about specific teams, and I'm trying to think of a team that overcame chemistry issues. And I don't know, nothing comes to mind that I can think of a team that maybe, I don't know if we had true chemistry issues. Maybe my last year with the Caps, but I don't know if that was team chemistry as much as a really challenging season coming out of COVID, where there were so many things that were out of control. Games would get canceled last minute. You would think you were going to play. And so that was a season more where there were so many things impacting, I think, players mentally, and the want and drive to play, that as a captain, I felt like I was managing so much more outside of basketball than actual, hey, we need to get so-and-so the ball, or we need to get this. It was more just keeping everyone trying to achieve when all of the circumstances were so difficult. I feel like that would potentially be the closest thing that I can think of.
But I think in your answer, especially comparing the American and Australian style of play, the thing that kind of I took away from your answer was that perhaps culture cultivates chemistry as well, because I know the culture around American and Australian basketball, specifically at the professional level, can be quite different, can be more focused on individual performances, how many shots someone's getting, who's getting an all-star, putting people in those positions versus creating a community and just a good vibe that people will want to keep coming back.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think you look at teams like, the Minnesota Lynx last year, that no one probably had on the radar as far as a team that would be pushing for a finals. And because of their willingness to share and all the pieces coming together, and, Cheryl being the coach that she is and fostering that culture. And I think Nafisa Collier, as far as leadership goes, she's up there with some of the best as well. So I think when you have all those pieces come together, it's amazing how many players have quote unquote breakout years when it's like they were always that talented, but you put them in a situation where they feel valued, appreciated, for whatever role they play. And all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, they're statistically doing phenomenally. It's like, well, they didn't get that much better at basketball. It's really more, how they feel about the people they're on the court with and the coach probably.
Yeah, and that touches on the issue that part of the issue I have with the whole breakout player of the year thing, but we don't need to talk about that.
Well, I will say it is an interesting one too, but I mean, Ezzy was the youth player for 7 years in a row, so I guess they did have to change it to something.
Yeah.
She'd probably still getting it. She'd probably still be getting it. She's still a baby and smashing international basketball.
There's so many players like that in our sport who remind me of the likes of, say, Rafa and Roger Federer, who were so talented and successful from a young age, and they had such a long career, and it felt like they were playing for 50 years because they were at the top of their game when they were 19.
Yeah.
I feel like, from your Kayla George to your Ezzy Magbiger, they're our... Yeah. They've been around for ages, and everyone keeps saying, oh, Kayla the veteran. I'm like, she's only in her 30s. It's just really good at 17.
Ezzy, I'll never forget, Ezzy and I were roommates at Con Games, and it was right after she had decided to not go to UConn, and she was catching a bit of heat about it. And we were roommates, and she looked at me, and she would have been I don't know, 17 maybe. She was like, oh, Kelsey, what do you think about, my decision? And I was like, Ezzy, it doesn't matter where you go. You're going to be great no matter what you do. And it was so cool to see her win her first championship with the Seattle Storm and be Told you so. And you did it probably 4 years earlier than you were gonna do by choosing this path. Like, she's just, she's. But what everyone loves Ezzy because she's an awesome human, and But it is interesting when you have a youth player or a breakout player, and it's like, well, how many times can they break out? Like 20, or when do we start?
You touched on something that I really want to kind of talk about. The whole concept of these players who have these breakout years. But generally, like you said, it's because they're getting appreciated for what they're doing. How much, from your experience, does the coach have to do with being able to get those performances from those players?
Oh, I guess probably a fair bit. Coaches ultimately are in charge of playing time. And I would say most breakout players have had a huge spike in playing time. I rarely think usually I would say it's a statistical award. There's probably an element of looking at previous season statistics versus current statistics. And I don't know how often it's done from a points per minute versus, total points. So, and I think, I'm someone who doesn't, I can appreciate statistics to a certain extent, but they don't necessarily tell as much of the game as I probably like to take on board. But I would say a coach does a lot. A situation also too, how much does winning play into the role? So like if a player moves from a team that was competing for finals and, they were the 10th, 11th man, and then they go to a team that's bottom two, but they get to play 20 minutes a game. Well, there's a good chance they're probably going to have a much better season than they did the previous season, just purely because of opportunity. But how much did they impact winning? And I think that's something that should always be put into the consideration is how much does someone impact winning versus how much can they individually statistically, because I think this might be a bold statement, probably shouldn't be saying it on a podcast, but I think almost anyone in this league could score 20 points a game. Like scoring 20 points a game is not very hard, but scoring 20 points a game, winning and making people around you better, that's hard. That's hard. Getting 10 rebounds a game, that's not hard. Getting 10 rebounds and not giving up a transition basket because you're sprinting, there's other things into the game. So I would love to see a shift in statistics playing less of a role, but that requires, I think, experience and expertise and selection, and it's just not the way that sports is done. So, but I guess I'll step off my soapbox. But yeah,
that wasn't near as controversial as I was expecting.
No.
Preface was like, I probably shouldn't say this, and I was like, oh, and I was like, this is fine. I think that's very appropriate.
I don't know. I just think it's so interesting. Like people say, have scoring 20. Like for example, Jade's 40-point game, last game of the season against us, to score 40 points and win and beat a team that's only lost 2 games, that is a performance, that's huge, but to score 30 points in a loss, it's like, I just don't think that has the same gravity. And I don't know what value you can put on it. I don't know if it's something that can be done as black and white as that, but I think that should always be put into the consideration is a player's impact on winning. I think it's important.
And even following from Paul's question about the importance of the coach fostering, say, breakout players, I think in my experience as a spectator and as a player, I found it was more the assistant coach. The assistant sometimes has to have a bit more face time with the players of managing emotions, anxieties, giving that feedback of hey, this was good, but next time you can make it better. Even Renee Garlop, friend of the podcast, doing a fantastic job with the Sydney Flames. There are so many athletes, even before she was part of the Flames program, that will attribute their success to her input.
Absolutely. I think coach feedback and knowing your athletes and knowing the type of feedback each athlete needs. I mean, I'm a teacher by trade. I've gone back to school and understanding that the feedback you give to one student can't be the same. It can have the same meaning. You can be trying to deliver the same I guess, idea to somebody, but the messaging with which it needs to come across and the impact that can have and it's all relationship based. And yeah, Renee's great at building relationships with, people, but also I'm sure her athletes. I got to play with her for one season, and she was a huge part of the reason I loved Australia as well. And so I think, anytime you have that really good rapport with your athletes as a coach and instill that belief, but not like a pumping up the tires and something where you're setting them up to fail, but this true, like really understanding your athletes. I absolutely think that can massively not just impact whether they have a breakout year, but whether they even keep playing or, whether they are enjoying themselves playing or how they then treat other people too. And so, yeah, it takes everyone for things to go right. And it can take one person to derail the whole thing, which is why seasons like ours are just so, so special.
Speaking of coaches and how important they are, obviously. So you kind of essentially followed Coach Kiriyama from the UC Caps to Bendigo when he was appointed as a head coach 2 seasons ago. But so what are some of his qualities as a coach that resonated a lot with you?
Part of what I appreciate about Kennedy is his lack of ego. So Kennedy was really, I suppose, receptive to my opinions, and I have a lot of them. And so whilst people might think I'm a dream to coach, I think it takes a very confident coach to be able to have someone give as much input as I do. And that it's not easy. It certainly wouldn't be easy to think that, you spend all this time with your staff and put a game plan together and to have someone like me who questions it, not out of trying to undermine or trying to belittle, but trying to really make sure everyone understands what we're trying to do and accomplish. Not every coach would appreciate it. So then you have that and you times it by Sammy, Tolo, Kelly, Veronica. And everyone's thinking, oh, Coach Kennedy had it cruisy this year. And it's I don't know if everyone quite understood just how much of himself he had to give up to be able to accommodate, very experienced players and, the diverse needs that we had. And so when Kennedy, got the job and he started recruiting me, one of the things that I really appreciated was his long-term commitment to me. So he offered a 3-year deal, which not a lot of coaches would have, considering I was 35, I think at the time, or about to turn 35. And so Kennedy saw something in me beyond my ability to play on court. He knew I could impact the game, but my leadership and what he wanted to build in Bendigo. And that meant a lot to me. And I think his willingness to be vulnerable and he has a very tough exterior and he can be very intense, but he cares really, really deeply. And so I think that's something that has allowed me to want to continue to play. And I think the other thing with Kennedy is he makes practicing really fun. I really enjoy his prep that he does. We'll train for 2 hours, but it'll go by like that because there's we're moving on to the next thing and we're scrimmaging heaps and we're problem solving and we're having player huddles and there's so much autonomy in what we're doing. And then he's built this amazing community for himself with development coaches where he'll have 4 coaches come in and literally from the training player to, Sammy Whitcomb gets an individual, or gets a small group workout. And whether we're on the road, then the development players who didn't get to travel are still working out and still getting better. And his dedication to treating, everyone to be able to develop them and make them better, I think is rare because of his relationships and how he connects with people who want to help his vision come to reality. And so I think all those things make Kennedy really special. And, I have a lot of flaws. He has a lot of flaws. We know of each other's flaws. We work through it. And I think, at the end of the day, we just both appreciate that we want the same thing, and that's to create something special in Bendigo.
With regards to the way Kennedy's sort of worked with you, you mentioned that, he brings a lot of people in that do the individuals and so on. How different is his coaching style to what you've seen in other places?
I would say he's pretty different from I guess a lot of the prep is done at training, in training, and then when it comes time for the game, the game is pretty much the game and how it's going to be played out. And a lot of the autonomy is given to players to make adjustments and problem solve on the floor, which hasn't always been my experience with coaches in the past. But I will say the one thing that, like, say someone like Kennedy and Gauze have in common, although they are very different coaches and express it differently, is their care factor is very, very high. And so whilst they're very different coaches, they do care deeply. And so I think that caring can forgive a lot of differences in opinions, whether it's, we should ice a ball screen or hard hedge a ball screen, or, like, I don't like that play, or whatever it might be. When you know that someone's caring and dedicated, doing the very best they can, I think that makes up for a lot of things. And I think that's something that I really appreciate about Kennedy, is just how much he cares.
So let's just go off and touch on something else, because this one's really got me curious. Okay. Now, you grew up in Anchorage, Alaska.
Yep.
Okay. Now, first of all, for most people listening, I'm guessing that they're going to be going, that's a long way away.
It is. I can tell you. Every time I fly back to Alaska, it is a long way away.
I mean, first of all, how did that, living in an environment like Alaska, because, it is definitely more challenging than other parts of the US. How did that kind of shape your worldview? But also, from Alaska to Australia, it's not a connection that most people would make.
Yeah. So being raised in Alaska, how that's shaped me. I think the interesting thing about being from Alaska is that you don't know any better when you're a kid. Like, you don't know that it's not dark, 20 hours of the day. No, that's a bit of an exaggeration. 16 hours of the day. That's not like, you think that's normal in the wintertime. The fact that there's snow berms that are taller than you, like, you just think that's normal. Like, that's just what life is in the wintertime. And then in the summer, it's never dark and you get to play basketball outside at 11 o'clock at night. You don't actually know it's 11 o'clock at night because the sun's still up. Like, that's just normalcy. So I think I'm very appreciative of being from Alaska. I think it, in a lot of ways, protected me from getting too far ahead of myself. I was allowed to be a kid. I grew up, we were, a camping, fishing family. That was what we did in the summertime. I basically played organized basketball for 3 months of the year, played soccer for 3 months of the year, and then the rest was playing biking, hiking, camping, fishing. That's what we did. And so I got into all sorts of different sports at school, but really just got to be a kid. And I wasn't on a trajectory or a pathway or a STP, NPP, earmarked for, a national team, because I was from Alaska and there just wasn't the exposure. That wasn't something that, people where I was from did. And so in a lot of ways, I'm really appreciative of that, because I loved my childhood. It was awesome. Climbing trees, getting into mischief. It was just the best. However, I would say the learning curve then going into college and certainly into pros was so steep, because I didn't know, like, I didn't even know what basketball conferences were. I couldn't have named what teams went to the Final Four. I had no idea about power conferences, and my parents didn't either. They had to ask around and ask for help. And so I think, going to Nebraska, I picked Nebraska, but it was really the University of Alaska coach who narrowed down my colleges, because my family needed help. We didn't know where I would fit or what would be a good fit. And so then, when I got drafted into the WNBA, I couldn't have even named the WNBA teams. So, like, for me, it was a lot. And, I was competing with people who it was their ticket out of their situation, or it was their dream since they were little, or they grew up going to WNBA games. And so my, pathway to being a pro, and then having to have the realization of what pro means and how I identify as one, was really challenging. One of the hardest things I've ever had to do. And a lot of imposter syndrome and a lot of fear of failure and all that kind of stuff wrapped into it. And so for me, coming to Australia, like, the amount of things that needed, to go right for me, but go wrong for a couple people for it to even happen it's crazy. So Chelsea Aubry, who is the import who played for Bendigo, the only reason she ended up in Bendigo is because she wanted to be a part of the first Canadian team to go to the Olympics. And so she kept playing past college. Otherwise, she probably wouldn't have. And it just so happened that while she was at Nebraska, there was a JUCO transfer who was going to be coming to Nebraska, but she ended up falling pregnant and moving back to Australia. And Chelsea stayed in contact with her, and they stayed really good friends. And so she ended up playing for the Braves and asked Chelsea if she wanted to come out here and play for the Braves. So then Chelsea ended up playing for the Braves, played for the Spirit. It was a great chance that Canada was going to get into the London 2012 Olympics. So then Chelsea ended up continuing to play. The Spirit recruited Kathleen Shear as an import, and it ended up that her knee was hurt when she got here. And so they ended up having to let her go. And so it was too late to sign a lot of imports because most imports already had a job. And Chelsea reached out to me to see if I would be interested in coming to Australia. And at the time, this sounds very harsh, but it was kind of where careers went to die, or people went, to go on vacation. Like it wasn't a popular place for WNBA players, which I was, didn't come out and play, unless they were retiring or they wanted, a holiday. And, the money that I was making compared to my previous contract, it was like a fifth of what I would have been on. And they had just opened up the Korean League for imports, and it wasn't a good financial decision or a good business decision or a good basketball decision, really, what my agent was telling me. But my mom said I should go because she'd always wanted to visit Australia. And for me, I was like, you know what? I don't like playing pro basketball anyways. Europe wasn't great. Israel wasn't really, I was just mentally, I just wasn't coping with what it meant and the individualism. And so I was like, you know what? I'll just go play one more year, save money, go back to med school. That'll be fine. So it really came out to Australia as a last hurrah. And then within a few training sessions and getting to play with the people and be around, I was rooming with Renee Camino, Rach Herrick, and Chantella Pereira. You couldn't ask for a better group of people. As an import who was lost and just knew how to have a great time, but just good people. And I was like, wow, if this can be basketball, maybe there's something to this. And then, as everyone knows, I met my wife, Erin, and the rest is kind of history. And I decided, this is what, if I was playing basketball, this is where I was going to play. So yeah, so that's, I guess, how a girl from Eel River, Alaska ends up in Bendigo. I will say, when they said Bendigo, I was like, I need to look at that on a map. And I was like, it's not even by a beach. Why am I going all the way to Australia? And it's like, I'm in this landlocked place, but it became home pretty quickly.
Gosh, you had the three best possible roommates for your WNBL experience. The perfect balance of taking basketball seriously, talent, and off-court fun. And like you said, just all decent people. So it's all meant to be. All the planets aligned for you.
It really was. And, I give Renee a ton of credit that year because they recruited Kathleen Shear, who would have been a 4 player, but very different player to who I was, or I am. And I really absorbed most of Renee's minutes. And, Renee she was coming, I think, off an MVP season in NBL 1, playing really great basketball. And she could have held that against me. She could have made it difficult to live with, but instead, she was showing me all the fine places of country Victoria, and we were cooking up a storm, and we were basically doing gym tanning laundry. She got me in a tanning routine. And so, I probably haven't given Renee enough credit for, really going beyond herself and making it such a special season for me too. And I think that's also speaks, you talked about Renee's impact on a lot of players, and that certainly contributed to the success that I had that season, was her selflessness of, it could have been difficult. I'm sure it was at times difficult for her because she still had plenty of career ahead of her at that time. And it certainly made my assimilation to Australia and want to become an Australian. She certainly played a role in that.
Oh, that's big trumps for Renee.
Yeah.
I will have to mention your reference to your gym tan laundry routine.
Did.
Room. Hilarious, because I can see her doing that too, of having those particular routine things to do, keeping up a tan, even though she is half Italian, half Spanish.
Yeah.
So
Well, she was hard to keep up with. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's always frowned upon what we were doing. We weren't necessarily sun smart, but yeah, I will say I almost looked Italian by the end of my first year in Australia.
Anywhere in Anchorage yet? At least got some kind of facility or statue or anything that's dedicated to KG23?
No, nothing that I know of. I know that there's been talks, I think, about retiring my jersey, my high school jersey. That may or may not have happened. I can't remember. Unfortunately, the timing usually is like, we're usually in season when it's the basketball season in Alaska as well. And so I've missed out on a lot of opportunities to go back and do things. And then usually when I go home, it's in the summertime, which school in the States, there's no like high school from May to August really. So, and that's usually when I go back and visit. So unfortunately I haven't gotten to be a part of as many things as I would like to, but yeah, I think now it's kind of crazy to think I've lived almost as much of my life in Australia as I did in Alaska, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Now, you made a throwaway where you sort of went, yeah, maybe I'd give up basketball and go back to med school. Okay, so you got to give us a little bit on that one.
So, as I touched on a little bit, didn't really know much about college conferences or anything. So, when I was picking where I wanted to go, academics was as important as basketball for me. I like school. I'm a lover of learning is one of the character traits that's been identified in my EQ test. And so when I went to Nebraska, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I started out in psychology. And then there wasn't really as much of a practical element as I needed, and wanted to do nursing, but couldn't with my basketball schedule. And so then settled on a Bachelor of Science with majors in biology and psychology, in the hopes of then going into pre-med, because the schooling system in the States is so different. University system is so different than Australia. So it's not like something where you graduate year 12 and you're on this pathway to become, a doctor or a pharmacist or whatever it might be. You don't test into that schooling. So you do an undergrad, and it can be, in a variety of areas, but you just have to have a certain core course and electives done to then qualify to go to postgraduate school, which I thought would be med school. I thought I would go back and, study medicine because of my fascination with the human body and how incredible it is and what it can do and be pushed to and broken and heal. And I wasn't sure at the time where I would specialize or what I wanted to do. And it's interesting because being here and playing and thinking about what life will be like after basketball, I really started to think about what actually practicing like a physician would be like what actual practicing would be like. And I came to the realization, I'm pretty appreciative that I was making this decision at 30 instead of 20, that learning to be a doctor, I think, is something I would really enjoy. But the actual day-to-day practice of being a doctor is very grueling and something that I think takes its toll on a lot of people, and wasn't necessarily something that I thought I would have the passion day-to-day to go in and do. But so now I just get to go down, journal article wormholes and YouTube deep dives into all of the things that I'm curious and interested about, and build great relationships with my physios and team doctors to get to learn and and osteos and pick their brains about the newest research or what's being done or what's being said. And so now I did my degree in teaching, and now I'm doing my MBA and really enjoying that, which is a path I never thought I'd go down either. But yeah, studying at Griffith University and really enjoying that.
I was going to say, if the idea of being a doctor is still kind of tempting, once you do your internship, which I understand is can be really grueling, especially if you do it in a hospital. If you get on the GP program, then you can be a GP. Lots of country towns or lots of regional areas like Bendigo need a GP. You can have that. You can be the country practice doctor.
I don't know.
The regular 9 to 5, local legend, basketball legend turns local doctor. I can see that storyline for you.
I don't know if I'm tough enough. I don't know if I'm tough enough to be a GP.
I wanted to ask you about the spirit and the way they've integrated themselves into the community in Bendigo. Can you talk about that? Because it seems to be that there's a lot more connectedness with the teams in the smaller centres than there is in the bigger cities. And how does that mould the character of the team?
Well, I think it takes a person who wants that to come play for a team like Townsville or a team like Bendigo. I think there's an element of giving up some autonomy from a standpoint of like, if you're doing it right, you should go to any cafe and someone should recognize you. Like that's the reality of it. Like if you're doing it right, you should go bump into the grocery store and someone should feel comfortable coming up to you and saying, "Oh, are you so and so? Do you play for the Spirit?" Or, "Oh, I went to your," like if you're doing it right in Townsville or Bendigo, like that should be like that. Then you'll know that you're doing it right. And so I think it takes a special person that's willing to have that and want that. But I think it also is something that's so incredible and like the genuine connection that you get. And that's something I was doing a talk at a school today about how for me, I learned early in my career, it was really after my first season with the Caps, that there was no award, no championship, no amount of money in my bank account. Not that I made a lot of money that season, but I was talking more about when I was playing in Europe, but that like that wasn't going to be something that I was like, I'm so happy playing basketball. Like I knew that there wasn't going to be some external validation that was going to make me want to go wake up at 6 a.m. and go work out before I went to class or work out before I went to work or, and so, or trying to make some team, like trying to prove that I could be an opal. Like there was nothing like I learned in that season after winning quote unquote it all that like those things weren't enough to fill up my cup, that I needed connection and purpose beyond basketball to be able to be fulfilled playing basketball. And so for me, I think that's something you get when you play in a place like Bendigo or a place like Townsville, potentially Geelong, if they get a bit more of a run up, is that when you have this connection to community and you see the impact you're making on people's lives, and it's beyond an event. Like it's great. Game day should be an event. It should be entertainment. It should be a spectacle. It should be something that everyone can go and enjoy, and it's super entertaining. But like the other side of things is getting to go and do the school clinics, and then those being the same kids you bump into at the store, or you get to go and do a talk at a school. And it so happens that you see that mom or that dad at the cafe that you go to and get your coffee, and they feel comfortable coming up and talking to you. And so then once you get to build those relationships and that rapport, then on game day, when it's those kids or those parents that you're signing that autograph, there's that connection, that purpose, that thing that's bigger than you, that you're potentially impacting for the future. That's like, yeah, this is why. Like this is, or not maybe the why, but it's certainly a big part of the why. And I think that just gets to be like cranked up, 10 levels in towns like Bendigo or towns like Townsville.
And you guys, you're also really supportive of Abby during her ride. How did you guys kind of decide to do that? Because it's something that really, would have made a huge impact for her.
I think if anyone is ever lucky enough to know Abby, you'd run through a brick wall 50 times for her. Like she's that person that like, and it's not just because she's had to live through more things than someone her age should have to and deal with more than that. But it's the way she goes about it. It's the perspective she brings. It's the type of teammate she is. It's the way she can find humor in things and like, just brings an authentic, genuine, like just appreciation for this world. Like it's, that kind of, those kind of people are rare, and her personality is infectious amongst the team. And, her willingness, Abby could be a starter on any team in the WNBL. And the fact that she genuinely is okay with coming off the bench, knowing she could be a starter, should be a starter, but knows that is what, like, that's the kind of person that Abby is. And so, when you're given the opportunity to go and drive a few hours to then surprise her. So when she turns down this paddock after 260 Ks on a horse, and you can hopefully jump out and not startle a horse and be like, hey, like, we're here for you. And then you get to go have this epic bonfire and meet her family and friends. And, you know, like, those are the kind of memories that not everyone gets to have playing basketball. You know, like that is a no-brainer. Like, it's an absolute no-brainer. You can bring in someone from leading teams and pay them 10 grand to do some team building exercise and talk about, you know, something and how are we going to change this if it happens in a game? Or you can see an amazing human do an incredible thing, raise 30 grand for breast cancer in honor of her mom, and be like, yeah, of course we want to be at the end of that ride and support you and surprise you. Like, it's an absolute no-brainer. And I think, you know, you talk about meeting people that change, you know, impact your life and change it for the better. And Abby is 100% one of those. And I think, you know, me and Abby have more fun off the court than we do on the court, and we have a lot of fun on the court. But I think some of our best memories are probably going to be when we're both done playing and don't have to be so considerate of our bodies from a basketball standpoint. We can go ride horses and do all sorts of fun stuff like that. So, yeah, she's just awesome. And I'm so glad that and I mean, that also, speaking of coaches, you know, Kennedy, that was in preseason and gave us time off to be able to go do that, you know. So speaking of a guy who understands, you know, and that was, I think, his second year. So we'd missed out on finals the previous year. You know, we were having a disjointed preseason. Abby was gone for it. He gave her the time off to do the ride, and then he gave us the time off to go up and see her and spend the day. And so, you know, that's also talking about a coach who gets it, that that's more than basketball too.
So we're kind of moving forward, and we're now moving into a new WNBL.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And yeah, but I mean, and there's going to be changes, but you know, some people are nervous about the changes because they're sort of like, you know, is this going to take away any of the special things that makes the WNBL the WNBL? But
do you ever ask those people what they think those things are?
Yeah, actually, I do.
What are they worried about? Sorry, I'm interrupting your question.
No,
I'm interested. What are they worried about losing that makes the WNBL special?
Okay, that the personal connection with the players.
Okay.
Right. So, you know, the signings after the game.
Yeah.
It's that kind of stuff.
Okay.
It's not the basketball. It's not the, you know, it's not that. It's the how we connect with the players, how we connect with those people that we see on the floor doing these amazing things. Because, you know, and I'm going to use an example that I know about. If I go back quite a few years, I'm not going to say how many.
We never have to put a year. We don't have to put a date. That's okay.
Right. I'm a motorsport fan. You used to be able to go to the races and you could comfortably walk through the paddock area, meet people who were at the pinnacle of the sport in Australia, talk to them. But then as the sports become more professional, that whole area of connectivity is gone.
Yeah.
Everyone's behind a fence. You can't go to see them. You can't talk to them. And it's lost something from the fans' perspective. But the WNBL has got to become more professional because there's all these things that have to happen for the players, for the game, for the product that's out there. How do you balance that? And, you know, because you've been talking about that whole connectivity that you have with the community in Bendigo, I'm really curious to understand, you know, your perspective on this one.
Yeah, I think it will be interesting how the NBL and Robin Denholm and her group choose to navigate this situation. And, you know, they're obviously very intelligent, highly intelligent business people who know how to invest, and they've clearly seen something that they know that they can take on board and make better, from whether it's a visibility standpoint, professionalism, whether it's hopefully a sustainability aspect to it, being able to provide hopefully longevity and continuity for ownership and season and strategic planning and purpose and and create a lot more vision of where we are and where we're going, and the steps and staging of how that will happen. For me, when I think of what I'm hoping to see as a player, the biggest areas of progression and improvement, I hope will happen in the high performance space. From a standpoint of right now, there's only one paid coach. Some teams are doing it where they can afford to partially pay some assistant coaches or an assistant coach. But I find it incredibly ironic in a league to have development players, but not actually have staff that are paid to develop. So, we're fighting for player progression, which absolutely should happen. But how then do we expect those players to get better if we're not actually resourcing programs appropriately from, S&C, physio, dietitian, sports psych, assistant coaching? And so, like, for me, my hope is, I look at an NBL bench, and I know it won't happen game one, season one, but I'm hoping there's scope for that high performance area to be better so that, we're not relying on a coach's relationship with other coaches to then give up their time and volunteer to come in and help players get better. Because I don't think that's fair. That we're asking players to not do that anymore. We're asking players to get played appropriately. And so for me, I'm hoping that that's an area of improvement. The other big area of improvement for me, I'm hoping, is visibility. And I think this is something that I think the NBL will absolutely do a phenomenal job in, from a strategic plan, from how we're going to market players, market teams, market the league, make it visible, and what platforms we're going to be on, the consistency with which people can expect content, to be able to share stories. I think sharing stories and that connection piece that you're speaking to, there's lots of different ways we can do it. And I think one of the things like your podcast and podcasts have done is provided a platform where people who care about maybe me and haven't heard my story get to, and in a much bigger depth and breadth than it would be a 5-minute or 3-minute grab before a game. And so my hopes is that kind of content will be curated and done in a professional way where more players are getting exposure to, and more fans can learn about them, have access to them, and feel connected to them in many different mediums, not just social media or not just a podcast who gives up time and energy and volunteers because of something they believe in. It's something that's resourced and done properly. And so I think through that, there's no reason that game days have to lose that connectivity after a game. And I think it's one of the things that I hear, like our GM, Dan Jackson, talking about, is an asset that the WNBL has that almost no other league offers. So it's actually something that should be celebrated and encouraged and continue to have happen. Now, if we're dreaming and we're selling out 15,000 attendance arenas, is it plausible to be able to have 15,000 people line up after a game? I'm not sure that's something we can do. But in the States, in the WNBA, you might have sections, or you might have memberships, or you might have other avenues where you can still have access to that connection with athletes. And I think it's something that is so unique to the WNBL. Jacko talks about it all the time. I completely agree. It's something that we can't lose. And, it's certainly something I don't take for granted now after games. When you're signing all these autographs, I'm like, there will come a day where literally nobody, because you don't even really sign receipts anymore. Now everything's just have to go. Nobody will want my autograph. So I'm like, yeah, it's cool to also hear that that's a concern, because it shows that does mean something to people, and it is a connection aspect. And I at least know at Bendigo, it's something that we're really proud of that we do and try to continue to do it well.
Yeah, I mean, we see it in Sydney, like when they do the signings and they've got them players at the tables and they're signing the posters, there's always a long queue.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so there's definitely an appetite for it. The kids want to meet the players, they want to talk to them, they want to get the signatures, and I agree. You don't see it I can't think of any other league where it happens.
Yeah, and so I think I do think it's an asset. So, and I would assume that most clubs would be giving and hopefully feeding that feedback up to the NBL. and saying, this is something that's really important to us and continuing to grow our fan base, because I would argue that's an area where the WNBL can continue to improve. Canberra was a great representation of it this year. Our, attendance got better as the season went on. Townsville's also always phenomenal with it. But continuing to build match day attendance, I think, is a priority and a huge opportunity for the league, moving forward when we're looking at venues and where we're playing and how we can maximize that. And, if it is offering a unique fan experience, like getting to meet every player, that's something I would think the league would want to capitalize on.
Because it's a big part of the league's identity as well. Like that, it's something so unique to the WNBL compared to all the other professional leagues in Australia. Because one of the other main concerns that long-standing WNBL fans have expressed about this new chapter being part privatized is that they're worried the WNBL is now just going to be integrated into the NBL and this second-rate basketball, and almost be like how a lot of American, I'm not going to say fans, I'm going to say American sport watchers, because some of the comments they write online would never come from a fan.
No.
Yeah.
How much they bring up how the WNBA piggybacks off the NBA. And I think a lot of long-standing WNBL fans are also concerned that the WNBL is going to be seen as something like that, and just treated as a little bit of the second-class citizen.
I think that's a reasonable fear. I think if you're, like you said, if you've seen any other female leagues acquired by men's leagues or female leagues started up by men's league, that's a real concern. And my hope is that, in taking over the WNBL or, is certainly the operations side of things, there would be a lot of conversations about how different the WNBL and women's basketball is to men's basketball. And so what are the opportunities? What are its strengths? And then how do you capitalize on that? And so I think for me, when looking at the scope and the target audience and target market, it's family based. Like the WNBL is family based. And that's something when you look at the game day experience, the type of sponsors that are attracted to the WNBL, everything that goes into what the WNBL represents in women's basketball in this country, all the way up through the Opals, and what that means in Australia. I think you have to continue that strongly into this new phase or new chapter of the WNBL. And if you try to create a replica of what made the NBL successful, then you're entering a saturated market, and it wouldn't be very smart business-wise, where instead I would be looking at what's made the WNBL great, what's made it successful, and then how can we actually resource that properly? Because that's really been the downfall of the WNBL, is it isn't the product, it's being able to actually finance appropriate operations, marketing, and actually have a strategic vision for it. And so I think the product's always been there. It's just been the resourcing to do it. And so my hope is that's how the NBL is approaching it.
Yeah, and I think there's some lessons that can be taken from the NBL one as well. To apply. I mean, for me, we went to Albury to watch the Bandits play last season, and the thing that always really surprised me about it was they had food trucks out front of the stadium. People were lining up. They'd go out of the stadium, go and line up, pick what they wanted, and there were two games. There was one on a Friday and one on a Saturday. They had different food trucks on each night as well, so there was variety. And stuff like that really engages people and makes families want to go out. Now, I know that's really hard with some of the facilities, the venues that the WNBL play at, but there's got to be some way to try and capitalize on that so that it's not just you're going to the game to watch a game and then go home. Do something else to bring people in a bit earlier, to entertain them, to help build a buzz around the event for the night, and get people who aren't season ticket holders, who don't normally go to watch basketball. I think there's a lot that can be learned from that. I'm sure there's got to be a lot that could be lifted from the Bendigo experience as well, because they must do things like that down there.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably, we talked, it seems like ages ago now on the show, we've covered a lot of topics, but we talked about me coming back to Bendigo. Another reason I came back was, SEN had signed a 10-year commitment. to the team and seeing out its success. And for as long as I've been in the WNBL, I can't remember someone or an entity having that kind of commitment to financially resourcing a team where I knew when I was coming back to Bendigo, money wasn't going to be an issue. Now, that didn't mean we had an infinite tap that we could just pour on and they were prepared to lose millions, but it was something where I knew I wasn't going to be having to scrape the bottom of the barrel and go to every sponsorship meeting to get funding. And so I think what's been great over the 3 years is SEN's appreciation for regional Victoria and understanding that Bendigo is different to Melbourne, and the community and the experience and the country experience and the pride that Bendigo has for its town. But then also because SEN's like philosophy is around making the game day experience great for fans. And so that's something that they're continually trying to look at, how they can make, to your point, an event for when you come to the game, you know, whether it's face painting, whether it's an activation out front with like a jumping castle, or, you know, game, like, you know, whether it's the hot shots, you know, playing a bunch of basketball hoop games, you know, and winning a prize, or, you know, whether it's having a sponsor come on board and hand out basketball or cowboy hats or whatever it might be, so that there's something every game that's a little bit different. And I'd be interested, actually, if you guys have a similar experience or if you've heard of similar experiences. For us in Bendigo, once we get someone to a game, they love it. It's just getting them through the doors initially. And then it's like, oh, I didn't realize it was that physical or it was that fast, or like, oh my gosh, you guys are so talented. And so part of it, you know, when you look at the camera angle, even the camera angles of our games and how they're filmed and portrayed versus an NBL game, when you have, you know, several cameras that are on the floor level, the ability to translate that across screens to really capture the physicality and the speed and talent versus having one camera that's high up and you're almost viewing it from like a scouting position. You know, even if the NBL can resource that better, so when you're looking at the product, you're like, man, if it looks that good on TV, I can only imagine what it looks like live, and being really able. So yeah, I think you're exactly right. Game day events, it should be an event, a family event, something for everyone. You get to enjoy it and want to keep coming back. I think that's the key.
Like when I was a kid, we used to go and watch the Sydney Kings play at the Entertainment Centre, RIP Entertainment Centre.
Yep.
They were notoriously the wooden spoon
Okay.
when at this period of the Sydney Kings history, but
Yeah.
they would sell out the Entertainment Centre nearly every home game. The crowd was really, really into it. They used to have like big flags, but I still remember, I would have been like 7 when I went. I still remember when they used to throw out the Coca-Cola yo-yos out to the crowd.
Yep.
And then now I got one and then I lost it at school. But that was all stemming from going to a Sydney Kings game, and it was just this spectacle despite the Sydney Kings losing.
Correct.
And, you know, it took me like, I used to go as a kid, and I think it took a decade later of the Brian Goorjian era when they went three-peat for me to actually see the Sydney Kings win a game in the flesh. But yeah, that's what I remember.
It didn't matter. Yeah, like it did and it didn't. And I think, you know, Australia has an amazing like football culture, from a sense of like, you know, you barrack for somebody because your parents barracked for them, or you remember going to the games as a kid, and it's what we all, you know, like, I don't think there's any reason that can't be the experience for families with basketball, you know, like, and it can be that, and it's shorter, you know, it's only an hour and a half that you try to wrestle your kid into a seat for, you know, like, I think there's this element, and I think it's just, you know, being able to educate. And for us, we found a lot of it's about information and helping people to be aware and know the differences, and the difference between WNBL and NBL1. Like, I think there's just this element, and that's why I think the visibility is so important, not from like a sell standpoint, but just so people have awareness about, you know, you can come to Bendigo, walk, you know, 5Ks down the road and see 3 Olympians play. Like, that doesn't happen, you know, like that doesn't happen in regional towns, you know? So I think I'm really hopeful that with the appropriate resourcing, that's no longer a hurdle. Like, that's just a known, you know, and then you get to focus on other things. Is, yeah, my hope for this next NBL ownership.
Yeah. To your point, like, we've brought people to games because we buy season tickets, even though we're there as media, and we're always giving the tickets away to people to come and watch the game. And they always come back and go, they're amazing. Right? we've only ever seen like the NBL. We didn't realize that we had such a great women's league, and it's really frustrating, right? Because like you watch people like yourself, watch the teams playing, and outside that group of people that are there at the game, you know that the visibility to the general public is so small, and it just shouldn't be, given the quality of the talented athletes that are on the floor.
Yeah, I mean, this might be the most controversial thing I said. Here we go. I think all you have to do in looking at making an argument for visibility in marketing is look at how in the same year there was an Australian hosted FIBA Women's World Cup and an Australian hosted FIFA Women's World Cup in the Matildas and the Opals, and see how important storytelling, visibility, and marketing is and the role it plays in sports. So you have one of the most successful national team programs in the Opals coming and playing. And don't get me wrong, like they drew well and it was good, but like no one was walking away from that tournament with Maserati deals. Conversely, the Matildas, which credit to them, this is not a knock on the Matildas at all. This is talking about what an incredible job Football Australia did. And the Matildas deserve all of it. But what they were able to go do with the appropriate resourcing, storytelling, and marketing to be able to have a country fall in love with these people and want to throw everything behind them. Like that's my hope, is that the NBL ownership of the WNBL will resource, market, storytell, and then these athletes that you guys have been able to celebrate for so long will be able to have this platform that everyone else gets to see them and be like, I really want to get behind that. Like, because they will, because that's what Australians do. Like, they love their sporting, like they love their sports. So yeah, that's my hope for it.
Now, a couple of times we've mentioned storytelling, media visibility. You mentioned SEN as well. You are involved in media and commentary and community radio, right? We find it fun. I'm sure you find it to be fun as well. How did you get into that space? And, what can other players in the league learn from your experience?
Such a good question. So this is something not even remotely on my radar. Like zero media training. Like I actually haven't had media training. It's, my media training was at college. I made a few of the incorrect comments in revealing too much game strategy in a post press conference, and I ran. And so then and my coach had me on the line. So I very quickly learned what you do and you don't say.
Whoops.
But that's that old school coaching for you. There was no gentle parenting without college. But essentially what happened was LJ decided to do the unthinkable and come back and play and represent Australia and make this incredible push, which ended up being for Paris. And so she was kind of selected for a lot of the commentary up until that point. And so once she wasn't involved in the commentary because she was playing again, my agent put my name forward for the commentary for the World Cup. And I think he'd almost done it without even asking me about it. And he told me, hey, what do you think about this? And I was like, absolutely not. and he was like, I think you'd be great. And I was like, no, I have never done this. I'm not doing it on that stage. Like, no, that's not how I do things. Like, I am very much like a perfectionist. Like, I can't. And Erin was like, you should do it. And I was like, I don't think I should do this. And she was like, you definitely should do this. And I was like, I don't think I want to do this. And she was like, you should definitely. So anyways, I was like, all right, I need to talk to somebody who's done it. And so then my agent put me in contact with another one of his clients or a close friend and who does a lot of commentating. And we basically had a chat and we kind of explained how the behind the scenes will work and what the producer does and, like how there's a play-by-play and then you'd be an analyst or you'd provide, like special comments and kind of explained all, because I didn't know any any of it. I had never paid attention to commentating except for when I disagreed with it, or I was like, that's not what's happening. Like I was very opinionated about it, but I didn't want to do it. And so, so then I kind of just, threw myself into the fire and to work with, Narrowly Meadows, who's just, I was like, where are you reading that from? And she's like, I'm not. And I was like, surely you have like a teleprompter, like the Terminator of like script that's going through, because like no one can recite. And she was just amazing. And, I got to work with Timsy, and, you talk about an icon of the game, and, Jenna was there as well. And, it was just, John Casey, and like all the great, I got to be in this thing when it was so cool. Cause then we just talk basketball, and like we talk about our opinions and what we thought, and the feedback I was getting just from sharing my opinions was so positive that it was really quite empowering. And I just had this really incredible experience at Worlds, and realized that it was a way I could impact the game that I had never even thought of. And I was, really lucky to get to work with a producer who really nurtured and encouraged my talent, and, was like constructive. And so it just made it was just another learning opportunity. So then what was really intimidating and scary turned into an incredible learning opportunity. And I was surrounded by a lot of people who wanted to help me be great. And so I left there, and they're like, look, it's never going to get better than that, because that was the most well-resourced commentating game you will do. What do you mean? Like, they're like, it's not like this every time. So I just need you to know that. And I was like, sure, okay, it can't be that bad. So then signed up to do WNBL commentary, which I felt a bit conflicted about as well, but I'd enjoyed the World Cup so much. But then I was like, well, I'm still playing, and like, I don't know how my peers are going to feel about me commenting on them and commenting about on play and stuff. But then it became quite easy from a standpoint of we scout anyways. So I was very familiar with systems, schemes, tendencies, and all of that kind of stuff, which was probably the harder thing that I had to do at World Cup, was learning the French. Like I was basically like I was playing, because I had to figure out, the French, Serbians, everybody, Canada, China, like everyone. And so ended up doing that, and I just really enjoyed it, and actually got a lot of positive feedback from my peers. And so then that actually made things a lot easier again, and people appreciated my perspective and how I broke down the game. And I didn't really think I was doing anything special, because I was just talking how I see it. And so because it became something that I think people appreciated, and for me, wasn't something that was necessarily like really the hardest thing was driving to Melbourne for 2 hours, doing a game, driving home, and then having to train the next. Like that was the tough thing. But yeah, this is a very long-winded answer to basically say I enjoy it way more than I ever thought I would. The podcast or radio show this year, I had zero intention of doing. It was not my idea. It was SEN's. They had actually, sold a deal to APCO that involved me hosting a radio show. So I found out about it and was like, oh, okay. And so then what turned out to be a bit overwhelming at the start ended up having all this autonomy to do what I wanted to do, which was help everyone get to know my teammates better, and local legends in Bendigo and upcoming stars. And so then it ended up aligning with what I believe is important quite nicely, and gave me an outlet outside of sport. And so do I have a future in it? I have no idea, but opportunities keep popping up. And I think similar to you guys, it provides a space to have really cool conversations with people you wouldn't normally get to carve out this time for. So yeah, I've enjoyed it.
You were fantastic at the World Cup.
Yeah.
Such a natural, like, we've always been fans of you as a player, and then you did that, and I was like, oh my God, I had this whole other awakening where I was like, she's a pro, like, so comfortable, natural with how you speak. You obviously had like a lot of joy when you were speaking. It was so good. Like, people were like, our little inner circle of basketball fan friends just had this kind of like, have you seen Kelsey? Have you heard Kelsey? Like, she's killing it. So good. It was like, if you were to do a retrospective highlight of the tournament, you being a commentator on broadcast would be on the list. Like, it was just so good.
Yeah, it was.
Thank you.
Because you just have such a great way of being able to translate complicated things. And like you said, the job is exactly what you described. Say what you see. The way that you're able to translate things like complicated things for fans, like systems and plays and, you know, why something worked and why it didn't. You just translate it into everyday language that everyone's going to be able to understand is such a hard skill. Yeah, it was, oh my God, you were so good. So you definitely have a future in it if you want it. And,
Thank you.
Talking about support staff around you that know your strengths, your agent, tick.
Yeah.
He keeps wanting me to retire. He's like, I'm actually more excited to work with you once you're done playing. But that's our relationship. So I told him 1 more year. So, you know, at least we'll see what happens. But yeah. Thank you very much for that. But I also it was people like yourself and you know, Erin was like scrolling through Twitter. She was like, I'm ready to rip apart anybody who says anything negative. Like, so Erin was like, I don't go on social media. But Erin was like, she was like ready to go. And like anyone that said anything, and she's like, babe, like, everyone loves you. And I was like, what do you mean she's like, and so then I think because everyone was so generous and like so loving, that then instilled confidence in me to feel more and more comfortable as the tournament went on. And so I'm so appreciative of everyone being so vocal about what they thought too and sharing that, because that certainly, I wouldn't have probably gone on to do WNBL and gone on to do more stuff, you know, had people not. So it's nice for all those nice keyboard warriors out there who are so lovely.
Generally, the long-standing fans of WNBL and women's basketball in Australia, particularly, who are active on social media, are generally pretty good.
Yeah.
It's all of the fence sitters and the people who are like, oh, I'll watch basketball because I like basketball, and they know nothing about the league or the players or the stories, that will sit on their keyboard and mash away.
Funny.
Yeah.
How education plays a role. Funny, right?
Oh gosh, yeah. It's that's a whole other kettle of fish, I think, in so many other settings of life too. But yeah, it was so good. It was just so good, and I really hope that you do find your way back to it. And you touched on a really good point that commentating and broadcasting or any kind of media is a fantastic way for players to stay involved with the game that isn't coaching or refereeing. Because, yeah, you have so much expertise, and now you just get to sit back and watch it and still kind of like talk about it in the same way that you would with your friends on the couch or in the locker room or on the bench. But now you do it as an expert and get paid for it.
Yeah, it's so true. Like, I think that's, you know, when I'm watching it like we'd watch Scout, where I'm like thinking, you know, okay, yep, that's, you know, they do that action. We're trying to get that. How can you stop it? Or, you know, that player probably broke out and did that. And I do think you're so right. Like, anyone who's been able to play long enough to have to do scouts and know scouts, or maybe even ask questions, feel confident asking questions or challenging scouts, or, you know, providing maybe a different scheme setting. Like, that's essentially what commentating is just being able to, you know, see that, say it. And then I think also it's knowing when it's okay to just let the play out. I think that was some of the best advice that John Casey gave me, was like, if you don't have anything to say, that's okay too, because people are here to watch the game. And so that also gave me a lot of confidence to not feel like, oh, I have to, because it's a timing thing, you know, like, and so there's a rapport with the play-by-play, and you're, you know, trying to feel them out. And so there's a chemistry aspect to commentating as well. And then when you have 2 analysts and 1 play-by-play, and then it's fun. I think, learning new things, getting to work with people who are, you know, professional at what they do, and you know, learn from them. I think that's probably the biggest thing with commentary that I really enjoyed, was getting to learn off people, and anything. But thank you, that's very kind of you.
And then, from the Laurie Chiswick book of commentary, quality over quantity any day of the week. And your play-by-play when you're in a panel of 3 also has the responsibility of engaging you when you're needed, and getting you know, responsibilities and stuff too. So the analyst is like the best. You just know out, and someone will ask you a question and you're like, yeah, this is what I saw.
Yeah. And I think, like, to be honest, the space that I would probably, if we're like saying what would the dream, you know, space in media be, if it's not doing something with, sharing people's stories from like a podcast point of view, is probably almost that, 30-minute show, pregame show, where you get to break down the game, previous games, what you expect will happen in the game, and that 30-minute post show where you get to really analyze what happened, what didn't go well, and you get to have more conversation based. Like, commentary is fun and getting to do the action based stuff, but I think what I really enjoyed doing was getting to do the, prepping my, 10 keys or 3 keys or whatever it was to Australia's success, to being able to get over the line, or what went wrong for Australia, or what they need to do for the next game. So yeah, who knows? Hopefully the NBL has shows like that. So hopefully that's a space the WNBL will have too.
They sometimes have too many shows. Make it every season, and then I just stopped trying to keep up with the shows. But the one I did like is similar to what you described, which was called The Crossover.
Okay.
And Maddie Garrick was part of it, and essentially it was like a preview and review kind of show around the games as they were live. So you've also demonstrated a lot of great ideas and expertise with marketing. I reckon you and your agent could go and pitch a show like that to the new WNBL owners.
Yeah, I feel like that's why he's like, you need to stop playing. Like,
like there's more for you on the other side.
We'll see. Yeah, I think unfortunately, like, you also have your most power when you are playing. I think there's this like cat and mouse game where it's like your relevance is tied up to actually what you can still do on court, but. Who knows? It's an exciting time though. It's been a long time since we could talk about what could be in the WNBL. So I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful. And I know it'll have its teething issues. Like anything, there's going to be lots of lessons learned in year one. And so I think it's having realistic expectations and keeping that excitement through some of, the shortcomings that, this is hopefully a 10, 15 year, 20 year plan. Not to lose too much faith, because I feel like the WNBL, he's broke our hearts a few times about, thinking we were going to have, some accomplishments or some wins or some gains that maybe didn't always come to fruition. So I'm hopeful that, this kind of commitment from these kind of people will allow for, true growth.
Okay, Kelsey, thanks so much for your time. It's been great having you on the show. It's been great talking about stuff with you and going well off topic.
It's not a good podcast unless you've gone off topic, right?
Yeah, that's right. So, Kelsey, thanks so much for your time, and it's been great having you here. Make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you get our latest pod, and we really appreciate if we could get a like and a review so we can extend the reach to more listeners. And don't forget, follow us on Instagram, Twitter and LinkedIn.